Hello out there, this is Wakeangel2K1, and the Sonic Boom toy line continues to drop at Toys R Us with the next figure in the series, Dr. Eggman. Now as you all know, Dr. Eggman's iconic egg shape for the Sonic Boom cartoon is still around, but it has been flipped upside down, giving him a much more fit physique. He has a big barrel chest, broad shoulders, and slim hips. Plus, his costume has been changed somewhat. It looks a lot more like an aviator suit now, like an anachronism from World War I. So, does this Dr. Eggman hold up compared to the previous ones? Well, watch the video and find out. So, the Dr. Eggman figure's sculpt is actually really strong. There's a lot of details in here and everything is painted pretty well, except for his nose. It looks like they wanted to paint his nose pink, but they kind of missed the brushwork and only got the very tip of it. See? There's also button detailing on his back, which is not painted. That watch device on his wrist is also picked out against the yellow field, but it's all just one color. I feel like maybe that dome piece in the middle should be another color. But the paint apps that are there are pretty crisp, so no big complaints about that. His stance, his neutral stance is with one foot slightly in front of the other, and he balances pretty well that way. And as soon as I say he balances well, of course I can't get him to stand. There we go. Articulation. It is pretty much on par with the Sonic figure I showed you before, except that the head does not move. That's something he has in common with the Jazwares, Dr. Eggman's. So, his shoulders are universal. They go outwards and all the way around. No wrist movement. He has one hand molded in a pointing gesture and the other in a holding thing form. And his legs move. He can go all the way into a sitting pose. And that is it. Swivel hips, universal shoulders. This is pretty much all that he does. In comparison to other Dr. Eggman figures, here are the Jazwares classic and modern Eggmen. As you can see, they're all roughly the same height. Maybe he's a tiny bit shorter. It seems that the scale that Tomy has decided to go with is just a tiny bit smaller than what Jazwares went with. He's actually almost a head shorter than the Jazwares Eggman, which is kind of weird. Although he doesn't seem to suffer too much from that. So, that's all good. So he may not have quite as much articulation as the Jazwares Eggman, like he doesn't have any elbow joints, and I know this guy at least has a waist joint. That's something that neither of these two have. But there is one thing that this guy has that the other two never did. And that, of course, is none other than the Eggomatic hovercraft. Oh my, this is such a great accessory. And for the record, this doesn't increase the figure's price point. It's still only $12.99 when you buy it in stores. So that's the same price as any of the Jazwares figures cost, but it's an egg pod! I mean, it's open in the back, but look, this is exactly how I think it should look. It has the stripe, it has Okay, it has 3 little lights in the front instead of 1 big one, but that's hard. That's a nitpick. It's the Eggmobile, exactly as I remembered from the early Sonic games. We never had a toy of this thing before, and it's finally here, and it's every bit as awesome as I ever hoped it would be. Now, it has a single peg in the floor, which is designed to accept the hole from the bottom of his foot. So, with a little bit of kajiggering and finagling, actually the hardest part is getting the peg lined up to the hole in the foot, because everything in there is black and impossible to see. Yeah, there we go. And then what you do with his arms is the holding thing hand can hold on to one of the 2 joysticks, while the other one goes over the windshield, so he could be as like you pose. So now that we have Dr. Eggman seated in the Eggmobile, let's take a look at the Eggmobile's detailing. The front has this big blue headlight and 2 little gun barrels. There's also a yellow stripe trim painted all around the windshield. And on the side, there's a sticker detail of this arrow mark. There's also plenty of sculpted detail, panel lines, vents, intakes, and jet exhausts, which are painted in a nice gray, with a pretty good amount of detail in there. There are 3 wheels in the bottom, 2 little ones in the back for balance, and a big flywheel up front. That's because this is another toy that has a ripcord gimmick. So why don't we take a quick break to the floor so we can see how the ripcord gimmick looks. Ripcord gimmick. Alright, so here is the Dr. Eggman sitting in his little pod, and here is the ripcord he comes packaged with. At least they went and gave it a nice little design flair. So, what we do is we stick it into the slot down here, thusly. Then you give it a good solid yank, and then you set it down and let it go. It works pretty good. Maybe if there was a little more rubber on the wheel, because when I set it down, it kind of skidded a bit, but the wheel is nice and heavy, and the pod has enough friction to go along the floor without slipping too much, so good on that. It works. Just in case you were wondering, you actually can sort of get the modern Eggman to sit in here in a way that looks pretty normal. You kind of had to wedge his fists in underneath the windshield right there to make sure he doesn't just fall out the back. And his knees are bent so that he's not standing in the pod like his boom counterpart is. But if you really wanted to have modern Eggman in the Eggmobile, you could pull it off. I'm not sure if this is worth buying multiple Eggmobiles so you can have an armada of Eggmen, but this is worth noting. I'm pretty sure the classic Eggman also fits in the pod. The only problem it being, well, I can't really test it too well because my Eggman can no longer sit. After falling off of my shelf a few years ago, his hips broke and I was forced to simply glue them back in place, so I can't put him into a sitting position. But I think if I was still able to, he'd probably still fit in there. It seems that his bulk would just about be able to fit within the circular confines of the cockpit. So, if you indeed wanted to have your classic Robotnik in the Egg Pod, I think you might be able to pull it off, though he might look a bit strange in there. I think it fits. I think it suits the modern Eggman a little bit better than this version, but you can still pull it off.